Hello and welcome to the Hack Responsibly podcast, where we get to know NetSPI's technical leaders. I'm your host, Karl Fossen, and today we'll be speaking with James Albany, the Senior Director that oversees network pen testing services here at NetSPI. I've gotten to know James pretty well over the years, and it was great catching up with him in this format. Here's my conversation with James. Welcome to Hack Responsibly, a NetSPI podcast focused on the experience of our NetSPI agents, including insights and trends in the cybersecurity industry. I'm your host, Karl Fossen. Today we have James Albany with us. James, you want to give everybody a quick intro about yourself?
Yeah, hey, I'm James. I've been at NetSPI for a few years now. I'm a senior director of infrastructure testing and lead those efforts at NetSPI.
Awesome. So, with Senior Director of Infrastructure, what have you been working on? What's kind of top of mind for you?
Yeah, so right now that's focusing on two things primarily. That's how we can improve our continuous testing capabilities across various verticals. So that's internal, external, cloud, etc. And then focusing on automation efforts and how we can use AI to augment our testing success and speed.
Well, those all sound like really cool things to be working on. How did you get your start in cybersecurity?
Yeah, so I started as a SOC analyst actually in a managed security services provider, and did that for about a year. Got a lot of good experience on different technologies. We managed IAM, so got a lot of experience with Active Directory and got to manage RSA tokens and then gamut of technologies for managing alerts and in the SOC there, and then transferred into penetration testing about a year later, getting into consulting.
Yeah, I never knew that about you, about the SOC side of things. When we met, gosh, probably what, 10 years ago at this point, probably?
Yeah,
Uh, you were at a different firm at that time and eventually came over to NetSPI here. But yeah, I didn't really know that about you. Very cool.
yeah. It was a overnight shift, but it was getting started in the industry, and it was my first foot in the door. So.
Speaking of first feet in the door, for people that are just starting their career, any advice that you would give to somebody that's early on in their cybersecurity career?
Well, the early job market is much different than when I entered the cybersecurity industry. So I guess like my classic response would be to look at SOC jobs like I did and kind of get a feel for the defensive side of the industry, and the security industry as a whole, how things are handled. But really today, I think people need to think about how AI can impact their automation and the speed at which they do things, and create tools and things like that. But I think that a big focus or a big piece of advice I'd give to newcomers is to really focus on the technical aspects under the hood of the things they're building. Really understand what's happening under the hood so that you're able to know what AI is doing really well and what AI is not doing so well.
That's good to hear. I think the fundamentals are absolutely important because, yeah, to a certain degree, you can trust some of these models to give you the right thing out of it, right? But if you don't know enough of the fundamentals to do the gut check and be like, is this just a hallucination or is this like really a thing? Uh, yeah, like if you don't know those core fundamentals, how do you know that you're actually reporting something that's real and valid, right? So getting that kind of
Right.
under your belt first, I think that's super important.
Yeah, exactly.
So speaking of, did you kind of cut your teeth on that with your initial entry into the cybersecurity field, or did you learn that, prior to getting into that SOC job?
Yeah, I think I actually had a research internship in college that allowed me to kind of build an Active Directory environment from the ground up. And then building off of that in my first job as a SOC analyst, getting my hands on a bunch of different technologies and then researching how those work. And really, as I got into penetration testing, realizing how the defensive side works for that fundamental understanding of how these things are being intaked by teams. And then, yeah, just building on that fundamental understanding and then constantly learning. I think earlier in the industry, there was a lot of focus on certifications. I think that's less and less now. And there's just more information available to people for lower cost or free. But yeah, I think just using those courses as learning material, not necessarily focusing on the certification, but making sure that you understand the information that those courses are displaying is really important for
I'm
fundamental understanding.
I'm really jealous. When I was in school, we were, I guess, in the program I was in, we were very locked into just Linux only and, very open source centric kind of things.
Or
And not that it didn't prepare us for the real world, but like outside of having a computer lab that happened to have Windows in it, like we didn't talk about Active Directory or Windows or programming for Windows necessarily. Like a lot of the
yeah,
computer science background that I had was really focused on like, yeah, you're gonna program in, C, C++, Python, stuff like that
or
on a Linux system. So we really
yeah,
never touched that. I think I really didn't get my Active Directory experience until I was out of school and worked
uh-huh.
for a smaller company where, hey, we need somebody to, manage the Active Directory environment. And okay, I can help out, I guess. And learned a lot. It was great. But, it was really more like in the job kind of experience.
Yeah. Yeah, the professor at Penn State, Nick Jacoby, he taught me a lot around that, and he explained the kind of situation that colleges and universities go through with that, where it's really a timing thing of licensing combined with curriculum approval, where by the time that they're approved to give more concrete material around like Active Directory users and computers for Windows 2008, all of a sudden that might be end of life or they're moved on to 2012
Oh,
and they're
yeah.
not teaching the latest material,
Yep.
which I
That makes
understand.
sense.
So yeah, it was a really interesting and unique opportunity to get to work with him and really build that out for a research project.
In terms of tools, techniques, other kind of, fun stuff that you've learned over the years here, do you have a specific technique or tool that you like to lean on or that you think is particularly fun to use?
I think on nowadays, I am surprised to see how effective things like Pixie booting are and network boot functionality with things like SCCM and config servers, being able to key in on that TFTP service on internal networks.
Yep.
I think otherwise I'll kind of date myself with some of my go-tos. I think nowadays there's a lot of tools out, right? There's a lot of options to do a lot of things. But before Bloodhound, I think my go-to was just using NetRPC in
Okay.
different ways for enumeration.
Hey,
And I think
it
I had
works.
just like a sheet of different NetRPC loops that I would run to enumerate
Yup.
Active Directory.
I could probably dig up my old checklist for that. I probably
Yeah,
still have that. Hmm.
yeah,
I'm gonna have to look for that one. So it's a good thing that I'm not a betting person, because if you had said TFTP was going to be as prevalent as it still is today, say five
sure,
to 10 years ago, when we were starting to see more of those attacks kind of pop up, and actually having some pretty good luck with it, I would have thought, oh no, the TFTP is going to be gone. Like I thought that was already kind of just barely hanging on by a thread, say 10 years ago. But it actually
right.
seemed to pick up a ton more of adoption over the years. And I get it, it's practical and there's a lot of different ways it can be implemented. And it's just interesting to hear how prevalent that still is these days.
Yeah, it's kind of open attack vector. I think a lot of it is like we've been checking for it for years, like you say, but I think a lot of uh, pen test groups might not check for it. It seems to be new information sometimes when we're identifying these things.
Yeah. And it definitely feels like something that's kind of evolved over the years. Speaking of things evolving over the years, what have you seen kind of as a shift in the overall threat landscape or potentially from testing methodology over, we'll say your years in the cybersecurity consulting space?
There's a few perspectives here. I think the biggest shift that I'm seeing is a focus on being able to operate continuously. So fixing that gap between point in time assessments if a new vulnerability is disclosed or a new service comes online, and having that tested, validated, make sure that you know if you are or not vulnerable to a newly disclosed issue, and things like that. And then nowadays, there's things like the mention of Mythos coming out. And I think that an important perspective to realize is that we're not dealing with any new problems or new techniques with some of these AI evolutions. It's more just a fire hose effect. So it's just the issues are coming at us faster. So like a year ago, 2 years ago, these vulnerabilities still existed. It's just now we're going to be faster to know about them, which is overall a good thing for the security industry, right? Because there will be less vulnerabilities that threat actors have access to that we do not. And we can know about those and patch those and things like that. But I think that's a key perspective that's lost on people is that we're not really dealing with any new problems in the security industry. It's just more of a fire hose effect of them coming at us faster.
Yeah, the volume that we're seeing with this and just the detection rates and the ease of being able to pull these things in. I totally agree with more of the kind of continuous approach of we have to be on top of these things because they are coming at us at a fire hose pace. Uh, do you feel like the time to proof of concept code is coming down? Because I feel like 10 years ago, you would get a vulnerability to get introduced, and you might not see proof of concept code for 6 months to a year in some cases. Do you feel like that is
Sure.
starting to shrink?
Yeah, and I think it will keep shrinking with things like Mythos. I think that drastically shifts that and could probably take some denial of service vulnerabilities into full remote code execution, um, depending on the vulnerability, and things like that. But also the shift of being able to develop checks for some of these vulnerabilities. So say you use something like nuclei, or any POC, just being able to generate a check and validate that is a much quicker process now than it was 6 months ago, a year ago, and things like that.
Oh, of course. Yeah, I think the big takeaway I'm getting here is that the time frames are reducing overall, right? Time to detect the actual vulnerabilities themselves, time to get detections written as, new things are emerging, research gets put out there, that kind of thing. And then time frames for remediation and just making sure that, everything's buttoned up and patched as quick as possible. I think everything's just kind of compressing to a certain degree, thanks to a lot of the AI stuff, which may be a good thing. Maybe the remediation part compressing a little bit, but when you start talking volume with the time to identification, you start, I don't know, blowing that out of the water a little bit. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this evolves in the next few years. So, speaking from, a client perspective and how things are evolving there, are you hearing any interesting things from clients lately or interesting asks that they have that might be pushing different directions?
I think it's kind of the same vein. Everyone is looking for how they can get continuous testing and then also um, what we're doing with AI and how AI is being used. We're having to use AI securely. We don't want to put any data in AI workflows, but you can kind of abstract that with tool usage and things like that. So it's really just mainly questions around that speed, how we're using AI, and how we're doing continuous testing, and how we're approaching those things to be able to rapidly identify these issues as they come out over time. So it's definitely a move away. The industry is starting to move away from point in time mentality and more security programs that go on for longer periods of time.
Yes, I would totally agree with that one. I have gotten some interesting questions regarding AI, kind of a like for better or worse, how are you using AI? And it's almost like it's a requirement that you have to use it, even if it's the right tool for the job or not. Uh, there there's some mandates out there that folks need to be using AI, and I don't know if I always agree with it because sometimes traditional automation is just the better choice. But yeah, AI it's useful in a lot of different cases, so it's interesting to get some of those questions.
Yeah, it's interesting because AI is making us overall faster, but there's also situations where putting something at the tool level will be faster than putting it at the LLM level. Um, if you need quick defined response, like if it's do X or Y, then the tool level is usually better than making that at the AI level, just for speed and things like that.
Yeah, I think we are seeing a little bit of a shift where folks are focusing more on what can AI produce to help the automation, like you were talking about nuclei templates, being able to produce those out of an AI and then utilize those in more traditional automations. I think that's really the way to go. Then instead of just sending the HTTP request and response over to the LLM to go, hey, process this and tell me if it's vulnerable. I think that's kind of a waste of AI resources. Like let's build actual templates to detect that instead. I think that's a little bit better focus, but that's my
Yeah,
opinion.
yeah, and another shout out. Jake Reynolds made a blog about how they were using AI and not use or what how they were thinking about using AI or not at wire speed,
Yep.
and whether they were considering themselves an AI company. And he had some good thoughts on that around how AI can produce maybe different results. So if you want something consistent, that might need to be at the tool level. And then he's the one who brought up the speed comment as well.
Yes. Yeah. Shout out to Jake and Tim over at WireSpeed. So you get a little bit more exposure to this than I do. I'm not in the reports, I think, as much as you are, but from a gaps and vulnerabilities perspective, what are you seeing? Are you seeing any kind of common gaps or common vulnerabilities across the board?
I think we're still seeing people catch up on Active Directory security, because that's a big one. And then externally, still seeing um, vulnerabilities that scanners can't find, though this is getting better. I think that's one thing that AI is improving a lot, is application level scanning at scale, because your typical network vulnerability scanners won't find something like Telerik UI is an easy example of just underlying technology in the application that could have a vulnerability associated with it, if using the wrong version or etc. Where some of the AI driven application scanners are able to drive better results there at scale. But historically, we're still seeing a lot of vulnerabilities come out of that angle of if a network vulnerability scanner can't find it, and then it's at the application level, then there may be still exploits present there.
Yep. Yep. That makes sense. So you had mentioned TFTP kind of prior. I always feel like that one's kind of underrepresented and not talked about as much. I mean, there's a handful of blog posts I've seen in the last, I don't know, couple of years here that call it out. But do you feel like that or any other topics are kind of underrepresented or people aren't talking about enough?
Yeah, I think probably that one with uh, just SCCM and deployment servers being set up in networks in general. I think we've given Active Directory a lot of attention and maybe had too much focus on that. I think that talks that have kind of not gotten enough focus at conferences, for example, and things like that, is some of the Linux environment and like Kubernetes stuff, where people there's critical infrastructure being hosted there, and a lot of times um, gets missed in common security assessments because there's so much of a focus on Active Directory and things like that. Um, and then the final one is supply chain risks and things of that nature.
Yeah, I feel like supply chain's picking up a little bit because we've seen some of the major compromises happen in the last year or so. Would
Yeah, I
definitely
feel
agree
like
on the
that happens every few years.
yeah. And it seems a little bit more frequent. It seems like some of the threat actor groups have been specifically targeting specific
Yep.
repos that they can potentially take over, and seeing some of the GitHub Actions takeover kind of things recently. A lot of that is getting really interesting to kind of see. So I think that's picking up a little bit. But from a
Yeah.
Kubernetes perspective, I felt like that was the hot thing probably like 5 years ago. People were really starting to get into that. Not just from an adoption perspective, but also from a security perspective. I feel like that's kind of cooled off a little bit, but I think it's really underrepresented myself.
Yeah.
Because it's definitely out there. We run into it a lot, but I don't know if it's just we've figured out the basics and everybody's talked about it already, and nobody wants to touch it anymore, or what the deal is. But so speaking of kind of hot topic things or things that are kind of fun, do you have a most memorable engagement or favorite exploit that you can talk about without sharing too much, info?
There's a few. I think most I'll cop out in that probably most pen testers' most memorable engagement is a successful physical test, where I was able to get into a data center. I found a door that was basically broken and could stick my credit card in between the hinge, um, and was able to get in pretty simply that way. But yeah, being able to kind of sneak around a building. I was in the break room looking at the fire escape plan and the building plan so that I could know where to go and things like that. And going around not being asked questions, those are always a fun one.
Those are
And then
really
yeah,
good pro
another
tips right there. The fire escape plan to get the building map.
yeah,
I don't hear a lot of folks talking about that, but I have personally used that in the past to kind of like map out the different areas I need to get to, and it's super handy.
sure. Yeah, and then another one, not sure how much I can talk about it, but it was just a really interesting engagement where um, a company was being pressured by a researcher about something the researcher had found, and we were able to work with the developers and really assess it end to end and um, prove the researcher wrong, but also it was just a very interesting process of really going under the hood of a product and testing it end to end for this and other things.
That is really, we'll have to talk about that one offline with a little bit more detail. I'm curious about that one. Yeah, we've had clients come to us saying, "Hey, this researcher is telling us we're vulnerable to this thing. Can you confirm it?" And I can think of probably two or three different situations where we've gone in and either gone, "Yeah, no, they're actually correct here. Here's what you need to do to remediate that," or a couple of situations where this is a really niche thing and it's not really a vulnerability. They're just kind of trying to scare you into, buying their services, kind of ambulance chasing kind of behavior.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of that myself. I think that's not the right way to go about it. But
always a fun time.
now that I know that you're on social engineering, Patrick Saylor, who we had on an earlier episode here, we're gonna have to give him a heads up that you might be an available resource here. I didn't realize you had done that before.
Yeah, I haven't done it at NetSPI, but I have done it before. That and red teaming, I kind of stepped away from when I came to NetSPI.
So I'm curious, did you volunteer to do the social engineering or did you just kind of get booked on it?
Yes and no.
I so
No,
it
so the my previous firm didn't have our services segmented as much, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So
And I
I
think
kind of just did the gamut of all things pen testing.
that's super common. Having worked at other firms prior to NetSPI myself, I feel like anybody that's, been at other firms or just in security in general and ended up doing social engineering, a lot of them just kind of got thrown on the project or kind of got voluntold to do it. That's how it
Yeah.
kind of started with me. It was like, I don't know, Karl seems kind of interested in this. Let's put him on the project. And then you just kind of fly by the seat, fly by the seat of your pants and learn it. And it's a ride.
Yeah, I think I think that probably started by when we were very early on in the industry. The phishing was usually maybe part of an external pen test. But then as the industry progressed, people started getting their phishing from other vendors, like security
Yep.
training vendors, things like that, where they didn't necessarily need it included in the external pen test and things like that. So that might have been a shift that played into it. But yeah, we had at my previous firm, we had kind of similar separation, but not as detailed, where we had application and infrastructure, but the verticals weren't as defined until shortly before I departed the company.
Yeah, I think when I started here at NetSPI, Scott Sutherland was doing a lot of our social engineering and kind of went, "Oh, you've done this before. Okay, you can do some of it." And I ran with it for a few years, and then we had Patrick join us, and Patrick took it over from there. And thankfully, we've got a much more robust program and a lot more training around it than years ago when folks were just kind of thrown on the projects and kind of, well, let's figure it out. So.
Right. Yeah, I think when I started, Scott was leading 5 services still, I want to guess. Something like that. But
I think we've grown significantly in that time. So yeah.
yeah.
Well, cool. Well, to kind of wrap up our conversation here, we usually like to do more kind of personal conversation stuff, learn a little bit more about you as a person, stuff you like. Do you have a favorite hacker book, movie, TV show, any kind of, I don't know, media thing that depicts hackers or cybersecurity?
Few, I guess. Mr. Robot is definitely the most accurate, I would say, just because they had consultants with making sure they were not misspeaking and things like that. I thought that was pretty cool that they put more effort into accuracy there. Um, but I mean, the classic, I think my favorite is probably War Games. And then the movie that actually, as corny as it is, the movie that got me into the idea of hacking was Hackers.
Okay.
I was watching it, and we had a family friend over that um, their son worked in the Navy in information warfare. And she was saying that her son basically was a professional hacker. And that caught my ear and started looking into it. And I got in contact with him, and that's basically the real, I guess, start to getting interested in this and in my journey, I guess.
That's awesome. I feel like it's so much more commonplace nowadays for people to know what cybersecurity is, and professional hacker is an actual job title, but 15, 20 years ago it did not seem as commonplace. And even in computer science programs, stuff like that, it was kind of talked about like, well, security is important. You should do security, but it never really talked about like consulting or doing
Yeah,
security reviews, that kind of stuff. It was just like, well, you should make sure that you protect against these hacker things that you might need to worry about.
yeah, exactly.
I'm totally with you on Mr. Robot. It was so refreshing to watch that and see things be accurate, because I came into it thinking, maybe they'll get it right. And then you're watching actual
With
command line
the
terminal things go in and you're like,
Yeah,
no, that's the command I would run. Who
a
did
lot
this? Like,
better than two people, one keyboard.
right, right. Or enhance. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
we turned to
Or there was what was it? CSI said, see if I can build something in build a GUI in Basic to track
oh
an
my
IP
gosh.
address.
Yep, yep.
I think that was a good
Oh
one.
yeah. Yep. So yes, I'm 100% with you. Very refreshing when it's something that's actually technically accurate.
Sure.
I mentioned it kind of at the start here, but you and I met quite a long time ago, I believe at DerbyCon.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So do you have a favorite HackerCon? And now that DerbyCon's gone.
Yeah, I mean, dating myself here, I think DerbyCon was my favorite, to be honest. I was disappointed to see that stop. but I get it. Running a con is a lot of effort, a lot of work.
Yep.
So really appreciate the people that did run it. But yeah, I guess I'd have to default to DEF CON. ShmooCon is pretty good. I don't know if that's still going. I haven't
But
gone in
that's
years,
done now
but
too.
no.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I guess I have to default to DEF CON. ShmooCon always had a few sleepers, a few really, really good talks that you weren't expecting. But yeah.
And that one also had a really good LobbyCon presence as well.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And that was one of the perks of Derby as well. Like I said, that's where we met initially. And like the number
Hmm.
of folks that I met or conversations that we had, down in the lobby kind of area. Not that it was better than the talk content, but definitely got tons of value out of that, in addition to like really solid talks that were happening there as well.
Right.
But
Yeah,
that's it.
exactly.
DEF CON's still really good. And I really like all of the different villages and kind of like subgroups that you get with DEF CON now as compared to 10, 15 years ago when it was really more like focused on the individual tracks that you had.
Yeah.
But yeah, I usually try to
Yeah, I'm a
pop
big
into just random talks, just go into a track and sit down and just, you know, do the roulette there and like, well, this one landed. This one's a solid
right.
talk. I'm really glad I did this one.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm also a big foodie, so I have a soft spot for Vegas and the food that is available to you when you're there. It's expensive, but lots of
Yes.
great options.
I I wish the prices there haven't scaled as high as they have. It's extremely expensive now compared to years ago, but
Yeah, you just go put it all on black and see if you're going to dinner tonight.
there you go. Well, uh, last question here. I always like to ask folks about kind of personal projects and things that they might be working on outside of work that might be kind of hacker adjacent or kind of home lab kind of things. Do you have any personal project kind of stuff that you're proud of or that you're working on that is kind of fun?
Yeah, I'm slowly, very slowly but surely setting up a home AI lab. I've always run small lab in my house, like a few VMs. I have a Synology and I run a GitLab server, things like that. Um, but yeah, slowly but surely setting up an AI lab. I jumped on the Mac Mini
Okay.
bandwagon, but the problem is the shipping time on those right now is 16 to 18 weeks.
Oof.
Yeah, and I think they're coming out with a new one, but I don't know. I never thought I would say an Apple product was the most affordable and practical option for a project, but it seems to be with the way GPUs are going and servers and things like that.
Yeah, I've looked into some of the automation stuff around that and setting that up at home. I just haven't had the time or bandwidth to do so. I already have a backlog of home automation stuff with the existing tech that I have and thought about, oh, well, I could automate it to do this. And like, yeah, but I also need to like fix the 10 other things that I need to do before I
Right,
actually get to that
exactly.
point.
Yeah.
So one of
Yeah, I
these
have to
days I'll
fix
get
the
there.
wiring in my house and yada yada yada. But
Oh yeah, you're talking to somebody who needs to pull some Cat 5 over here. So, yep. Or well, I guess Cat 6, whatever. Anyways, I need to pull some networking wire at my house. That's on the
yep,
to-do list. So, well, yeah,
the ever-growing list.
really appreciate the time today and getting to have a more in-depth conversation with you here in this format. If people want to get a hold of you, any preferred channels for that?
I don't keep up with X or Twitter as much anymore, but can reach out to me on LinkedIn if you're trying to connect. I keep up with that pretty frequently these days.
Good to hear. And there's typically comments on videos related to our release for this. So if folks have any questions, feel free to drop those in the comments. We try to keep tabs on those, see if anybody has any questions we can answer. But yeah, really appreciate having you on today. And anything else that you might want to promote or share?
Nothing more from me.
All right. Well, again, thanks for the time, and we'll talk to you later.
Thanks.
And that was our conversation with James Albany. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Hack Responsibly. If you'd like more episodes, make sure that you like, subscribe, follow all the things, and check out NetSPI's website to get connected with us. Thanks again, and remember, hack responsibly.